Good morning, all. So today's the third day of the GSE conference, the last day for this week. Hope we see you all again next week. This session is session 3 a.m. Please remember to do feedback at the end of the session. We really use it, so that would be good. The session will be presented by Ben Horwood and Domenico Del Tiro. I'm sorry, Domenico, I'm never sure exactly how to say that.
That's fine.
And this is a statement of direction from IBM for IBM Z JCL Expert, a new product. So you're the first to hear about it, pretty much. So again, this year, we're following a couple of charities, the Lifeboats and the Guide Dogs for the Blind. Please donate generously in appreciation of the session you're about to see and hear. And also, you know, giving, it's not just giving, there may be some receiving. You'll receive a raffle ticket for every £1 you donate. And I believe there are some quite impressive prizes. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and they'll either be answered at that point or later in the session. At the end of the session, I will allow you to unmute so that you can ask questions directly to the presenters. And I think that was everything I wanted to say at the start. So over now to you, Domenico and Ben.
Thank you, Anna. So I'm Domenico Dalterio. I'm in IBM the product manager for the Z automation products. And we are working with 20th Century Software to develop this new IBM offering. And this session is intended to be very interactive. I mean, we will ask questions during the session, and we will copy them in the chat so you can answer to the question in the chat if you want. It is a statement of direction. So as usual, there is the disclaimer that you shouldn't make any plan on what we will announce today. That is already announced through an official RFA announcement letter from IBM back at the beginning of October. What are we announcing? We are announcing the intent of IBM to create a JCL checker tool. We realized that in our portfolio, and we already got comments like, better late than never. However, we realized that in our portfolio, it was missing such kind of tool, so a JCL checker tool. And we realized either that it's something that almost every mainframe customer needs to prevent execution time failure or processing delay just because of a JCL error. That can be a syntax error, can be a dataset that doesn't exist that is referenced or whatever. So a JCL checker tool mainly aims to allows the operation team to be more efficient and avoid problems, let's say, in production or at execution time, as well as it helps the developers. So application developers to be more efficient in their development activities, being able to check the JCL they are updating or creating in the development environment they are using. On top of it, we know that many customers has JCL coding standard that are their own, and they want to have all the JCL in their environment to be compliant with those standards. And this is the second feature that usually a JCL checker provides to the users. Finally, we envision a third capability, that is the ability to have mass JCL update, and it's something that we will have later on. And it's useful mainly when you have an hardware or software replacement or upgrade, or even For example, if your company acquire another company or there is a merge, and so you have to update a bunch of JCL, for example, to be compliant with the JCL coding standards and rules and so on. So what you see on the slide is the official, let's say, statement of direction. Now, in the rest of the presentation, we will go more deeper on what we plan to deliver as first delivery. The current plan is to have it available to our users by the end of March next year, but we will show you even what we have in mind for the follow-on release. We are approaching the development in an agile mode, so we will have frequent deliverables on the product, adding features, but even, and this is where we need your help, even responding to customer feedback or user feedback, what is needed earlier, what is needed to be successful in your journey. As I said, we will have a few questions during the presentation, and if you can answer in the chat window, we would appreciate it. The first question is about if you have in your company in use a JCL checker tool. And if you have it, if you would be so kind to even say what tool do you use currently, as far as you know, in your company. So feel free to answer in the chat, and the answer can be even don't know, because it's not in your area. Okay, let's go ahead with the second question, and then I will present even some content. The second question is about the users of JCL tool. So we envision that developers and system programmers are potential users, the schedulers, the operators, but we want to hear from you if there are other users of the JCL checker tool in your company, or who are the primary users. And you can continue to answer to the first or second question while I will go ahead. So who are the personas in our development cycle? We have two major, let's say, input to the development team that we give at the beginning of the cycle. The first one is we look at who are the users of the offering that we are creating or the feature that we are creating. The second input is what is the problem that we want to solve. And then based on what are the personas of the tool and what is the problem that we want to solve, we build the real development plan, filling the content. And so in this presentation, I will go through with you the reasoning that we made so far, so we can get input to see if we are missing anything. And in terms of personas, we usually identify two kinds of personas. The primary personas that are the users that most frequently we use the tool, and the secondary personas that are personas that in their environment, by the way, they use even that feature or that capability. So as primary personas, we envision two major personas. The Sanjay, that is an application programmer, likely is a young application programmer, so it's new to mainframe, and he has just basic knowledge to program on mainframe. His responsibility is to build JCL application using JCL standard and with no errors. So the challenge for the application programmer is that he's not completely confident about enforcing JCL standards. So since he doesn't have a great experience, he is afraid to miss any of the standard he has to follow, as well as he's afraid to introduce in the JCL errors that would cause a problem at the execution time. The second primary persona we collapsed in the IT operations, and they are the schedulers or the operators that their responsibility is not so much about writing the JCL, but it's more about ensure that the business service level agreements are met at the lowest cost. So their challenge is to have the JCL running smoothly when they are executed, even because some of them, if not a big chunk of them, will be executed overnight. And so they don't want to be called just for a JCL error. And they deal with a high number of JCL procedures across different helpers. So they have the challenge to keep under control all of their environments. Finally, as a secondary personas, we see the migration assistant. So they are experienced in IBM Z deployment solutions. Usually they help our customers in migrating from a competitor products to an IBM products like the scheduler or whatever. And in their job, they are used to make changes to the JCL to adapt them to the new scheduler, for example. And they have the challenge that on one hand, they have to change that manually, even if the change is repetitive, like changing a site rule or something that is needed by the new scheduler. And it is time consuming. And the other challenge is that they want to be sure that everything is correct once they completed the changes to the JCL. So based on those personas, we identified two ills. So two problems that we want to solve. The first ill is, and for each ill, we always identify the person that is affected by the problem. What is the problem that the persona is facing, and what would be the solution that would make his or her life easier. So in the first ill, the persona is the application programmer or the system programmer that is not very experienced with the JCL. The problem is the ability to check the correctness from syntax point of view of the JCL that they are writing or updating, and even the compliance with the company standards. And what would be the best for them? The best would be to have the JCL checker functionality in the development environment they're already using to edit the JCL. And so we envision them using an Eclipse plugin, as well as ASPF panels for more experienced people. The second ill is instead for the operations and the migration assistant. As we say, they are more focused on checking mass of JCL, a big number of JCL, and their challenge is to have the production batch running safely without any job failure, because a job failure can affect the ability to match the SLA commitments and deadline. And so they will likely leverage a batch interface to the JCL checker to have multiple JCL checked in a single shot. So based on those two ills that we identified, we created an experience-based roadmap. This is the third and final input for the development team. The experience-based roadmap is composed by the personas objectives, where we will have, again, the three personas that we identified with what are their objective in general on a JCL checker tool. So again, for the application programmer, they need a tool that can quickly validate the JCL before the execution to speed up the testing time. They need it even to move their artifacts from development to QA environment and from QA to production. The scheduler or the operation teams that are the production control, they need to ensure that all the JCL that are promoted in production meet the size standard and will be executed without any JCL error. Let's say the migration assistant instead need a tool to help identify mass JCL changes needed for software under changes and can implement without any application disruption. Based on the overall objective, we identified user values and then capabilities that we want to provide over time. I mentioned at the beginning that our first deliverable is currently planned for March 2022. And the content that we envision right now for the first deliverable is the content that you can see here as user value. So in the first column as user value and capabilities. However, we already had an idea, a plan, a roadmap, let's say, for what we will deliver even in the following horizon, so in the following releases. So this presentation, the rest of the presentation will be focused on Horizon 1, that is the first content, but I will give you even an outlook on what is in the roadmap, so you can even comment in the chat if there is anything major missing in the roadmap that we created so far. This roadmap is already the outcome of multiple interactions that we had with our users, let's say I mean on other products, or even people that is facing with customers and so knows what are the challenges in this area. And believe me, since the first edition of the experience-based roadmap to this one, multiple things were changed and moved around. So focusing on the first horizon and the capabilities, obviously we will have the syntax checking for as base feature of the product, as well as the validation of in-stream utility control statement. For the validation of in-stream control utility control statement, we will have most of them, the most important, as we saw in the first deliverable, and we will complete possibly in the second horizon with the more let's say complex, but even possibly less used control statement utility control statement. Already in the first horizon, we will have even the validation of site-specific JCL standard, and on this point, we will have questions later on. We will have the ability to invoke it, so invoke the JCL checker either from the ASPF panels, from let's say running as a batch, so in batch execution mode. Again, in terms of checking, we will have the check for dataset existence and duplication. And something that is possibly a differentiator, and we have some more slides later, is that we want to have the tool even able to be integrated easily in any hybrid cloud application. So we will provide a tool with a REST API interface. So it will be possible to invoke it through a REST API to get the output in JSON formats. I will anticipate that the REST API interface will be available through the Zoe API mediation layer. So we will leverage the Zoe REST server and the authentication features provided as part of Zoe. And finally, already in the first release, to give value to the application programmer, we will provide even a plugin, an Eclipse plugin with an integration with the IBM developer for COS. In the second horizon, obviously, we will continue with any syntax checking we could have missing in the first horizon. We will complete, as I mentioned, the utility control statement validation. We'll provide additional check for cross-reference report on DB2 for SMS constructs. And we will validate even utility control statement in dataset or partition dataset members. The major enhancements in Horizon 2 are the last few ones. So the possibility to perform security checking on the submitter user of the JCL. It will be supported RACF only in this horizon. We will complete it in Horizon 4 with the other security tool. And in Horizon 2, we will have even an integration with the IBM Z workflow schedule. On IBM workload scheduler integration, we envision two kinds of integration. The first one is the ability to have variable substitution in the JCL before performing the check, based on the value that IBM workload scheduler will use when it will execute the job. The second one is instead from IBM workload scheduler to the JCL checker to launch in context the JCL checker on a single job that is selected either on the web UI or on the panels. In the third horizon, we will continue with the incompatible parameter checking, validation of IMS batch parameters, and the validation across multiple systems. And there are even here two major enhancements that will be the scan for equal condition code to replace them with if-then construct, and the plugin for VS Code. A comment that we frequently receive is about enable the tool to change something automatically. It will be done, but it will be always under the control of the user. I mean, as you will see, even in the fourth horizon with the JCL autocorrect with approval, we know that our customer don't like something that automatically change their JCL without any approval process. So every change that the product will propose will need to be approved, or it will be possible to configure what changes the tool can do automatically without an approval. And it applies even to the scan for equal condition replaced with if-then construct. So finally, in the fourth horizon, we have the JCL reformatting, additional security checking that I already comment, the self-documenting JCL within job, the report, so on JCL dataset and programs cross-reference, the autocorrect, the possibility to invoke as a front-end processor from TSO submit, and surrogate security checking. As said, the presentation is available in the conference website. Even later after the session, you want to review it and you want to provide us any feedback on the experience-based roadmap, feel free to do that. There is our email address in the deck. That said, let's go through in more details on what we want to provide in Horizon 1, and I will give the word to Ben for that.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so we're just going to walk you through some of the more technical details. Looking forward to Horizon 1, as Domenico just told us. We have a slide here which describes the basic process of validation. So at the top, you can see resolve. So we're going through, we're breaking down the JCL into statements, checking for JCL libs and such like, so that we can recreate the system search order, and therefore includes and procs into the stream. Stream goes into an analysis module, which will then return the result of the validation. So you'll have your syntax validation, the in-stream utility control statements like idcams, site-specific rules, which, as Domenico says, is something that we're curious about your feedback on, checking for the existence of data sets and duplication, and also recreating this system search order to look for load modules and tell you where they came from, make sure that they're there. Okay.
We have another couple of questions for you. The first one is about what do you use to have in JCL today? So if you use mainly ISPF panels or IDZ, and in that case, which version do you currently use? VS Code plugin, we know it's something that is coming based on previous, let's say, interaction with customer. There is interest, but it is still coming, let's say, not yet really in production or used by our customers. And other, if you have any other. Okay, and then another question is about if you integrate or want to integrate JCL feature in any automated process. And if so, if you can give any description, high-level description of what do you have as integration points, and what interface you use. Okay, let's move ahead with the next few slides that are about the interfaces that we will provide as part of the first deliverable.
Okay, thanks, Domenico. So I can see we've got quite a few traditional 3270 type query here. So the first interface, the one which you'll probably be most interested in, we have a mock-up here, which is the ISPF edit interface. So the idea would be that you're in the edit session, you issue an ISPF edit macro. This then is submitted to the JCL checker, and then you receive annotated source essentially that comes back. So there'll be note lines that are inserted in your editor where there are problems with the JCL. You can do things like expand procs, and pretty much as you see here. So another traditional interface here is that for the batch. So if you want to write some JCL that invokes JCL check, you can certainly do that. The output is then produced on the spool, and you can check against both a single member of a PDS or an entire PDS, in which case it will systematically go through each member in the PDS. It will try and determine if it's a proc or if it's a job stream or if it's a fragment, and then check it accordingly. And all the output will be produced in the spool as you would expect. So you can see an example of that on the right there.
Thank you, Ben. So now, before moving to the next interface, let me give you a very brief and high-level introduction to Zoe. I don't know how much of you are familiar with Zoe. Zoe is an open source project where IBM, CA, and Rockets contributed at the beginning to create a framework to demystify, let's say, the mainframe. So the mission statement of Zoe says that the objective is to reduce the learning curve for new people, let's say, approaching the mainframe, providing a more standard interface and unique interface to interact with mainframe system and subsystems. So with ZOS, with JAS, with MBS, and with Unix system services. There is a continuous improvement around Zoe, but the very basic are the 4 components that are shown in this slide. So there is a Zoe API mediation layer that is a catalog of API with some even automatic discovery capabilities that allows you to have in a single point, single pane of glass, all the API to interact with mainframe, the REST API to interact with mainframe. As part of Zoe itself, are provided API to interact with the ZOS, to interact with JAS for job management, let's say, to interact with MBS for dataset management, and to interact with the Unix system services. However, since it is a framework, the final goal is to have it extended by the different software vendor with specific add-on for their own products. And we do it, for example, in IBM as well as other software vendor, extended Zoe API mediation layer with additional group of API to interact with the different products and features of the platform. On top of the Zoe API mediation layer, as part of the framework are provided 3 major components. The Zoe application framework, that is a web UI, completely browser-based, so no Java requirements. And it includes a 3270 panel emulator, as well as a few apps, a few applications that are specific to interact with one feature or one subsystem or one system or another. So together with Zoe, I provided 3 major plugins: the JS Explorer, the MBS Explorer, and the Unix System Services Explorer, that, as you can imagine from the name, allows you to interact with JS, MBS, and Unix System Services. So, for example, as you can see in the screen capture, you can see the different data set with the dataset member, and you can edit them in this web UI. All of the 3 components rely on the API that are part of the API mediation layer, and all of the 3 components are extensible from the different products, from the different software vendors. The second component is a Zoe command line that offers a set of commands to interact with, again, with the mainframe, and it enables an easy integration in your scripting or in your DevOps tool chain. And finally, with Zoe is provided even a Visual Studio Code extension called the Zoe Explorer. And again, a couple of questions. I said to you at the beginning that it was an interactive session, and we want even to gain some inputs. So did you already know Zoe? And this is something eventually in use in your company. We know that many customers are moving to this framework, different stages to reduce the learning curve, to have a more standard interface. And there is one important point. So Zoe itself is an open source, so obviously it's supported by the community, but it's not really officially supported. However, IBM, since March 2020, made available an IBM Zoe, an IBM distribution of Zoe that is supported so by IBM as every other IBM product, and it will be available for each IBM offering that extends Zoe, including the JCL expert. So it is not something unsupported that you would need in your environment. So the next question was if you use in your company, but based on the answer that we got on the previous one, I think you already answered to that. So let's move forward, and Ben, you can comment on our extension of Zoe with the REST API. Thank you.
Sure. So as Domenico just discussed, we pre-reg the Zoe API mediation layer, and we contribute APIs in the same way that all client APIs of Zoe do contribute, which gives you a bunch of neat stuff like single sign-on and the ability to have a command line extension, which, as Domenico mentioned, could be useful in your DevOps tool chains. So our REST, well, if you could call them APIs or RESTful APIs, you can invoke them against a single member of a PDS, the entire contents of a library, or a block of JCL text. For example, if you were to write your own editor app or plugin, you might want to grab whatever's in the text editor at a given time and upload that. And also in this model here, we can see on the left the client application. So this could be the Eclipse plugin, it could be a VS Code plugin. It's currently looking at, I think, Horizon 3. Workload schedulers seems to be a very common potential usage for this. And any tools that you've got that are capable of making REST requests could potentially tie in here. So you'd initialize you'd first authenticate with the Zoe API mediation layer. You then send in your REST request, much as you would for any other API. And then at that point, our software will interact with JCL Expert, perform your check through the batch system, and you'll get your results in a JSON format back to consume, as you would for all modern JavaScript apps. And what you get back is essentially all of the errors, informational messages, warnings, which link to the positions in the JCL stream where these were found. And here we have an image of the Eclipse plugin. So it sounds like mainly we have a 3270 audience here, but if there is anyone that's used IDZ before, it's a fairly common tool in a lot of development houses. This editor at the top you can see is actually part of IDZ, which is the ZOS Explorer, which is the JCL editor. So we're going to go ahead and tie straight into that so that people's typical workflow isn't interrupted. It's not shown here, but you could right click, for example, on that editor and then issue a JCL expert check, the results of which you can see below in the remote error list. So this essentially is scheduled to communicate via REST through to JCL expert, get the JSON back, and then it produces this error list down at the bottom. And the use of that is that, for example, if you have an include that includes an include and so on, and then the JCL error is found somewhere not in the file that you're editing, you'll get an error back in this view. You can then double click on that error, and as with all modern editor support, it will then open that file and take you to the line where the problems occurred. And if you have the file open that applies to the particular error message, you'll see in the left margin there's a bunch of eyes there, which is for informational, and at the top there's a red cross because we see we've got an exclamation point in the job name, and those indicate errors and or informational messages. When you hover over them, you can see a hover over text below for one of the informational messages. It will give you an idea of what's gone wrong there if you don't want to look at the remote error list view.
Last couple of questions. As anticipated, we are interested in understanding if you use site-specific JCL rules, and if so, what kind of JCL rules do you have in use in your company? And if it is complicated to answer, we can even answer then when we will unmute all of you for comments at the end, question answer at the end. Okay. And then for who use what would you like to define site-specific rules? So regex code, custom language using regex like patterns and tagging, or other? Okay. And finally, how do you differentiate between different site-specific JCL rules? For example, rules for test versus production systems, to the job name, the job class, or through anything else? Thank you for the people that is answering to my questions, our questions. I'm trying to balance to give you time to answer and to not having too boring presentation. We are almost there. Do you feel that an integration with a scheduling tool in use in your company is important? And if yes, what kind of integration? We mentioned a couple. So the variable substitution and the possibility to launch in context from the scheduler the JCL checker tool. Okay, and we are at the last questions. You can be proud to arrive there. So as said, we are developing this tool, and we would like to have you working with us during the development phase. So it is something like 1 hour meeting per month. It is the maximum that we can envision, where we will show you the progresses that we are making and to gather feedback and to eventually adjust our development plan. If you are interested in being involved, we need obviously your business email address. You can send us as a private message in the chat to me, Domenico, or to Ben, or you can send us an email even after the session. And with that said, our email address are, as said, in the presentation that will be available to everyone after the session. We finished our, let's say, slides. But now, Anna, if it is possible to unmute everyone, if there is any additional comment, feedback, or question, we are here to answer.
Okay. So I have made it so that people can unmute themselves and have a discussion or ask questions. Please feel free.
In the absence,
go ahead.
Sorry, Domenico, I was going to say, in the absence of an initial question, I'd like to ask Paul Mitchell a question with regards to the rule sets that he was speaking of. When you say application X equals rule set X, does that mean, for example, if you're using DB2 related programs in your JCL, then you've got a set of rules for that? Or what do you specifically mean by that?
Paul, you have the ability to unmute yourself if you want to answer speaking, let's say.
Okay, I'm reading your message, Paul. So when you say application, you mean like DB2, IMS, or?
And Paul, you should be able to unmute yourself. Bottom left of the presentation screen.
I'm afraid that we lost him. Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But he can contact you via.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And it's for everybody. I say that you have our email address. So as Anna was saying at the very beginning, remember to submit the feedback. It's important for the conference organizers, even to plan for next event that hopefully will be back in person. And to submit the feedback, you have to replace NN with 3 a.m.
We are already planning next year, believe it or not. So your feedback is greatly appreciated. There's also a feedback form for the entire conference. So we would really like if you made your feelings known in that feedback form as well. The charities, don't forget to give generously to this year's charities. And I will just lead the applause, thanking Ben and Domenico for this very interesting session.
Thank you.
And yep.
And can I just say thanks to everyone who attended, and please, if you have an interest in this, don't be afraid to reach out to our email addresses there.
Thank you very much for the participation and the answer that you gave us. Their valuable feedback that we will use in our development process. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the conference.
Okay.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
You're free to go, by the way.
I think I've finally sussed out how to get off mute.
Ah, excellent.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for your input. So the last question was, if for application you mean like DB2, IMS, stuff like that?
No, not necessarily on different transaction managers, the actual application itself. So, for example, we might have a banking application or something like that. So they would have different standards that they'd have to adhere to. So anything related to that application or that particular site might have different rule sets.
Okay.
So you might use something like the first 3 characters of the job name is representing the application, and that would set the rules to be used, or something like that.
Yeah, or on a different ZOS LPAR, there might be different applications running, so we'd use different rule sets on those systems, for example.
Cool.
Okay, got it. Thank you for your input. And if you are interested in having additional conversation with us, let us know. You have our email address. We envision not more than like 1 hour meeting per month to show what we are developing, what are the progresses, and to gather additional feedbacks.
It's a chance to be involved in the design.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thanks very much, guys.
Done deal. And it was, I would say, very good in terms of attendance.
You had a lot of attendance. Yeah, I was quite surprised for it being a late entry to the agenda. That was excellent. Yeah, and there is a reason why the attendance at these sessions is lower, and that's because most of the GSE membership has historically come from the system programmer side of the shop. So the sessions have always been there for the systems people. It's only since I've been doing these tracks that there's been operational content. You know, so that's slow to pick up, because quite often the operations side of the shop doesn't know anything about the system side of the shop, and they don't know that, or they don't know that such things as GSE exist, because, as I say, historically it's always been the systems and DBAs that have been part of the process. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
Well,
but that was a very good session.
Thank you.
Yep. And see you another day.
Yeah. Bye. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye. Cheers.